Welcome to the Decoding Innovation podcast series, brought to you by the EY Nottingham Spurk Innovation Hub, where we explore the innovative technologies, business models, and ideas that are shaping the future of industries. During each episode, Mitali Sharma, a principal in the EY Parthenon strategy practice, meets with stakeholders at the cutting edge to discuss innovations in their space, challenges they need to overcome, and their outlook on the future.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mitali Sharma, and today we'll be talking about e-bikes with the founder and CEO of an Ohio-based company, Land Energy, Scott Colosimo. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's talk about your funding journey. You started with some seed capital, and now you just went through a Series A funding. Tell me about this journey and, again, lessons learned.
So I would say most of this journey has been learning the capital markets. I've always worked in a big corporate environment, and then I worked in my own startup environment, but we self-funded the first company. So we never brought on investors. This has been the largest learning curve that I've ever been through, which is raising capital. So the funding journey was one of, we had Cleveland Cyclewerks running. Even though we weren't making product, we had a bunch of product in the warehouse. So we were constantly shipping parts. COVID was a time where everybody was fixing their bikes, wanted to get out and ride and enjoy. So Cleveland Cyclewerks funded the startup of the e-bike company. It got to this tipping point, however, where we had designers and engineers, and we were basically running a support business for a legacy gas motorcycle manufacturing company, right? So we would spend 4 to 5 hours doing this, and we would spend 4 hours shipping parts, answering consumer issues, everything that happens with gas, right? Fuel injection issues, carburation issues, pistons, springs, all this. So the journey was, I'm sitting on one side of this. I have a whole team of product development professionals here that need money to exist, yet it's absolutely burning us out running these two businesses, right? Being catapulted into the future, thinking about all these things we're going to do and all this stuff we're going to produce, and then being sucked back into this old gas motorcycle legacy business. The team came to me and was like, we're all going to quit if you don't make a decision to end the gas business. And it had been weighing on me for a long time because I felt like a proverbial chain was holding us back, but it was funding the company. So I just woke up one morning and said, done. I'm going to put a message on the website that the business is for sale. I'm shutting it down. I don't know, but we're done. And when I made that decision, it was easy. I owned the whole thing, bought out all my partners, right? It was 100% my decision. I didn't realize how profound of a shift that was going to be, because literally overnight I cut off everything that was funding, call it Cleveland Cyclewerks Electric, right? Land wasn't even an idea back then. And I remember within 30 days, my bookkeeper came to me and she's like, what's going on? There's no money coming in. And I said, I know. How long do we have? We had about 2 months of money to make it. And I was like, oh, this is real. So I threw a little bit of money in, went out to friends and family, and we were looking for $200,000. And mind you, back then that was insane for us. $200,000 was a whole year of R&D for my other company. So, and we got $400,000 worth of interest. So we were oversubscribed from that friends and family round. And that's when we were like, oh, okay. It was difficult. It was a lot, but there was an appetite for it. So that friends and family round turned into a seed round. So I think so that first seed round was about $400,000. We figured that would last us 12 months, but we didn't want it to, because we wanted to prototype quicker. We wanted to move quicker. We followed that up pretty quickly with so friends and family to seed. Seed round was a couple $100,000 more. Then I said, okay, well, if we're really going to do this and we see where the market's going, we've got to do a Series A. So the plan was to do a full Series A at 5 million, but then I had some really smart folks come in and say, hey, let's do a rolling raise. Let's brand the Series A and A1, A2, A3. Let's pull it rolling, and once we get a significant tranche in, we'll close the A1. We'll create some, FOMO to move into A2, and we'll just keep moving that way. And then I went out and knocked on every door that I knew. One of our first funders was a relationship from 12 years ago, someone that I didn't work with back then, but we looked at working together. We kept in contact. We followed each other for years, but we never worked together. So that was the first significant investment. And that's where I started to realize when people say a decade old overnight success, like a lot of these relationships had said no to me 12 years prior, or said, hey kid, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You're not going to be able to make motorcycles. Or a lot of them I went to right at the beginning and they were like, get out of here. Like, this is too small. Or so they saw my journey just push through for a decade and just carve out a little space in a really big established industry. So they had some faith that, hey, maybe he got smarter during that process. So those, what I would call high net worth individuals, some family office, no real professional money. And then as the checks get bigger, you've got to find more professional capital. So then we started attracting early stage private equity, some venture, some family office. And to date, we've only raised $7 million. And that's not because I only wanted to raise 7 million. I would have loved to get 100 million in by now, but our journey has been, at least my journey in business has been walk, crawl, fly, right? You taking it slow up front, and then once you get the basic down, you can start to accelerate. So now look at what we've got as a company. So we went slow. So on about 5 million, it did what it took all of our competitors 50 to 100 to do. And we've only given up that small percentage of the company. We've only raised that small percentage of capital. So our KPIs are very reachable. 30 units a month, 100 units a month, one B2B contract, right? We don't have to all of a sudden have to produce 100,000 vehicles overnight. Unsustainable, right? And at least in the hardware space. So the journey has been one of, we've brought in some partners, they followed us, they made intros. And keep in mind, I have no idea how to raise capital. I've never done this before. And all of the learning has been on the job learning. So now I understand what institutional capital is looking for. I understand what strategic's looking for. We now have some good contacts in the industry. EY's made some good contacts for us. Just saying, hey, there's this group in Cleveland doing some cool things. Would you be interested? That's been huge. The journey has been, again, very much like our journey in starting the business. It's sloppy. Like there's no level of success. And then what happened, interestingly enough, what happened at the end of 2022, we hit what I would call kind of that first wave flop, where if you remember, the valuations of companies were, especially early stage companies, were out of control. 10-man operations with $1 billion valuation, right? The valuations and the kind of capital being raised was a little bit unsustainable, and the promises didn't happen. So 2022, that all came. Of course, the market started to collapse a little bit, and that fervor around e-bikes are everything, and we're going to change the way people buy and move, and it's like, oh, this is going to take time. Like this isn't going to happen overnight. So these $1 billion valuations, or this idea that we're going to put 5 million electric bikes on the road, that fervor, the kind of tech entrance into hardware, that hard learning cycle hit like 50 companies all at once. So now the failures of others have made it a bit harder for us to raise, but because we have so much IP, and because there's so much value, and because we've vertically integrated and we own so much of that stack, the VCs and the investors that are willing to scratch the surface a little bit and look at what we're doing, it's by no means easy, but the considered investor, the investor that that understands value, especially in hardware, platform, digitization, this idea of digital revenue from hardware assets, that educated investor sees the value of what we're doing with the platform. And I'm spending a lot of time talking about this because it is the hardest thing I've ever done. I've never experienced more no's in my life. I heard people, oh, well, you'll get 100 no's for every yes. We're probably like 500 no's for every yes. I mean, it's you got to just take a beating and you got to get back up and say, hey, I believe in this. I'm going to keep pushing it. But yeah, the funding process is, and this is something I'm passionate about now. I will say this is something that I'm already thinking there's a need here. What's the next business, right? What's the next direction? I've always had this like ultra optimistic, pessimistic attitude. I'm able to just keep taking the negative and keep it positive. And if I didn't have that ability, this process would be completely soul crushing. But the funding, and I'm sure if there's any other founders listening right now, they're going to be nodding their heads being like, it's brutal. It's necessary. But it is, I will say I do enjoy it. So it is an enjoyable process.
Thank you for that very, very candid answer. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience will too. Shifting gears a little bit, let's look at your manufacturing and supply chain decisions. Talk me through that journey of what you make. How do you make that decision of what you will make internally or buy or, assemble?
Sure. Well, let's talk about geopolitical first. Or we could talk about global trade first. It's become increasingly difficult to rely on a very dispersed supply chain. Whether that's in Europe, in China, in India, it's become increasingly difficult to do global sourcing. It's getting easier again, but I don't think the golden era we had leading up to 2020 is going to come back. There is definitely the geopolitical, which is very clear to us, which is this weakening or this direct split between the U.S. and China. It's palpable. We work with DoD, DOE. It's clear that this is going to become a reality. There is a desire not to have the entire world's manufacturing floor in mainland China. So we can just be clear about that. There's no hyperbole. These are just facts. Add on top of that what we call the Chinese tech transfer, which is anything that we've ever made there gets rapidly copied. And it doesn't just get copied, it gets copied and copied and copied and copied. So I call it you can either choose to work in that environment and say, hey, I understand that this is the culture, or you could say, I don't agree with that. We had IP theft for almost 15 years, complete and whole IP theft from our Chinese partners. So starting a new company saying, okay, there's this problem, I'm like, what's the benefit anymore? What is the benefit of us designing a product, using China as our kind of manufacturing floor, having all the IP stripped out of our company? There's no benefit, and it's getting more costly. It's more difficult. The timelines are growing. We looked at this from how do we control our supply chain? How do we control our IP? How do we work with factories we trust? And again, there's this, okay, if we're going to assemble them here, it doesn't make sense to ship all these big, bulky parts. So we increasingly leaned towards advanced manufacturing in the US to help us scale up production. And being in this business now for 12 years, producing in country just makes sense. So global tariffs don't allow us to produce a product in the US and ship it to Southeast Asia, ship it to China, India is still friendly with us, but there is a tariff now. The way the automotive world typically will work is you make it in country. So the product we're making in the US, yes, we're going to export it, but that's not a global plan. So we will have to manufacture in Southeast Asia if we want to sell in Southeast Asia. We will have to manufacture in India if we sell in India. So knowing that, what did we do? Again, some insight from EY, reading some of your reports, we digital twinned our factory. We became smarter. We digitized a lot of what we were doing. So if we need to quickly prop it up, let's say south of the border or in Southeast Asia or India, we've got a whole digital blueprint for how to do that, what machine to buy, where to put it, what the throughput is, tag times, all of that. So the maybe I went bigger with the bigger with the answer than you wanted, but all of these things have become increasingly important. So we didn't set out to do everything in the US. This wasn't a focus. It was, hey, how do we get a product that's relatively easy to make as close as we can and shorten that supply chain thing from 4 months to 15 days again, right? How do we shorten it? And we've increasingly looked towards technology. We stopped doing a lot of stampings and we went right to laser cut and CNC bent. We've got some of the newest machines here in Cleveland that are feeding the auto industry, and they're not 100% used. So there's a lot of new factories, highly automated, popping up in and around Ohio that have the ability to do the most advanced manufacturing. And when you're looking at under 30,000 pieces, some of these techniques they're less expensive than the traditional stamping techniques or, some of the traditional forging or forming techniques. And that's really how the whole thing's developed. It's been, we have a need. Let's look at the market, the shipping, logistics, geopolitical, and let's figure out a way to do it smarter, right? I didn't want to recreate all the old problems we have. And that formula has served us well, right? You have a problem, you try to solve it. Can't solve all of them, but we found that's one thing I will mention is everyone tries to look at this transition to electric cars or electrification as like a political thing. It's really it's a transition in technology. It has nothing to do with us with products. We're moving from a economy of things that move, right? Things that are powered by fossil fuels to a compute economy. Cars are mobile computers. Mm-hmm. And it's a logical transition, right? You're going from moving things to solid state. So the way we're looking at this is it has nothing to do with the green aspect is important to us, but I don't think we're there yet. To us, this is a technology play. In the US right now has some of the most advanced manufacturing technology in the world.
You talked about protecting your intellectual capital. So tell me your philosophy around patents.
Sure. Patents to me are nothing more than a business tool. It allows us to create and protect, kind of wall our garden off, right? It allows us to say, this is what we're doing, this is what we've created, and you shouldn't enter. I will say patents are getting more and more complex, especially when you get into digitization, and they have less and less value. And I firmly believe this, that we are in a business cycle right now that is so quick and it's so rapidly evolving that know-how is the new patent. Having a team that has know-how, having the ability to quickly move, quickly change, the know-how to me is everything. The patents are a business tool, right? It allows us to own a very specific portion of what we want to own, especially what we've created. And that's maybe where my thought differs from a lot of the kind of leaders I talk to in this market. I've seen patents bankrupt companies, this obsession over patenting things bankrupt companies. And being a designer, I can't tell you how many, call it Joe Schmoes, come to me and I'm waiting to release my idea till I get this patent. And, I spent $25,000 on this patent. And I'm like, the commercialization is the hardest part. Like the patent process that's not that difficult. So yeah, we're very clear on, at least I'm very clear with my team, that the know-how is everything, and developing our in-house knowledge, especially on the high IP items, is very important.
So tell me a little bit about your capital allocation strategy. Because, like you said, patents can bankrupt a company, not just pursuing your own, but also making sure you're not infringing on somebody else's. Then you've got manufacturing, you've got R&D, obviously you've got all the personnel cost. How do you make sure that the right allocation is provided to whatever you're trying to do?
That's a really important question. What I did was bring in an expert. My CFO has scaled 5 companies, some startups, some kind of middle market, and one went to IPO. And they've all been digital, tech focused, or hardware enabled products. So because I am not an expert at balance sheet, I brought in someone that could really help inform me on where the buckets needed to be, helped keep us within those buckets, and then been flexible enough and entrepreneurial enough to say, okay, well, we need to spend a little more here. So allocation wise, in the beginning, we spent a big goose egg on marketing because we had to get a product to market. So call it the first year and a half of the company was 100% R&D spend. We did organic stuff, anything social we did, but it was us just putting out what we were doing, inviting people in. And now so we were almost 100% R&D. That switched to 50-50 R&D manufacturing because we built a factory. We had to tool up, staff up. So that then moved to getting the factory built to make the things that we were going to sell. Then we did an organic launch to launch some pre-sales to get some investor confidence that we were going to do what we said we were going to do. That cash then went to a marketing expense. Marketing has been the biggest thorn in my side since we started the company. I've come to the realization that I can't do everything, right? I can't do all the marketing. I can't do all the design. I can't do all the sales. So I've had to bring people in to assist us in certain areas. And for 12 years, I ran all the marketing at my other company. So that's been the hardest thing to hand off because we're spending probably 4 times what we were before. I really wanted to quickly get our benefits package up for our employees. That was really important to our team here to make sure we could attract top talent. So for the first year, we had no benefits, it was difficult. If you're coming from a corporate job to a startup with no benefits, that was difficult. So we had to allocate quite a bit of capital to get all that up and running for our employees. If you go to any venture site and you say, how should a startup spend money? We're pretty close to this, this kind of startup paradigm right now.
This has been a fascinating conversation, and I could talk to you for another couple of hours, but I know you got to go. Before we leave it off, what are your words of advice to an entrepreneur, maybe dreaming about creating something new, or somebody wanting to leave their corporate job?
Well, it's like anything I've done. Do the hardest thing first. And if you do the hardest thing first and you get through that, everything else is a little bit easier. And still to this day, I spend more time lamenting over the hard thing. As soon as I make that first step, it's infinitely easier than it was in my head. And as complex as the world seems right now, as hard as it seems to cut through it all, if you've got an idea, you firmly believe in it, just take the first couple steps. And that's the one thing I have to keep reminding ourselves is we don't have to follow the path that you see in the media, right? This idea of bringing in 150 million and overnight, valuation of X amount of billions and this huge exit. That's not real, just like everything else that you're seeing, right? LinkedIn's the business version of TikTok. Nothing on it's real, right? You've got all these influences on there trying to show you that, hey, I scaled my business from nothing to a side hustle of $1 million a month in 6 months, and I've never had a business background. Like, that's kind of discouraging, I think, a whole generation of entrepreneurs, and just making that first step and starting small and getting a little community around you, doing it organically and stepping it a little bit bigger, right? You don't have to make the sweeping gesture of quitting your job overnight. It took me a year to start my first company. I iterated on the business model for my first company for a year. I was laid off, right? I like saying fired, but I was laid off. So that thrust me into entrepreneurship pretty quickly. But just taking that first step, right? And actions are everything. The reason that we quickly wanted to get a product to market is because we knew we would learn a lot getting product out. We'd learn much more than just keeping kind of stealth mode and keeping quiet. So having a real goal, right? Getting a product out, whether it's digital, whether it's hardware, whatever it is, getting something out there. And if people hate it, great, awesome feedback, make it better. If people hate it, make it better, right? The process is just one of doing, right? And I spent years lamenting over things that I thought were going to be hard, and then I started them. I'm like, oh, okay, that first step, man, it shattered that illusion of how hard it really was. So, the encouragement is just try it. And hey, if you fail, that's entrepreneurship, right? I think like maybe 1 out of every 50 things I try really works. 1 out of 20 kind of works. So failure is just a part of it. And you got to embrace the failure.
Thank you, Scott. This was a fascinating conversation.
The Decoding Innovation podcast series is a limited production of the EY Nottingham Spurk Innovation Hub based in Cleveland, Ohio. For more information, visit our website at ey.com/decodinginnovation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to spread the word.